My husband worked for the mental health center that years ago when it was just starting out, and lots of friends have worked for the mental health center. They now call that Centerstone.
Yeah.
That place. And then I know people who have worked, like Bloomington Hospital has a freestanding counseling clinic on Landmark, I think it is. I know some people who work there. And then I know a lot of people in private practice.
Okay.
I've been in private practice. My husband's been, he still is in private practice. A lot of my friends are in private practice in Bloomington. And then Catholic Social Services, I've referred there a lot. They have a very good counseling program. Family Service has a very good counseling program.
The few people, because I wouldn't know everybody who's in CAPS, but the few that I have met, I am certain that they genuinely care, and that they've been doing it long enough that they want to help, and they also sort of share the concern with the campus and saying, like, we need to be doing something for our students because they need it.
I think IU does a pretty good job with mental health services. Every student is offered 2 free sessions through CAP. However, that could be improved upon because one of the free services is like a triage where you just go in and they just kind of like assess your risk and where you're at and your mental state. But there's not a lot of counseling that goes on in that session as far as I'm aware. And then the second session is where you kind of get more into it, but then from there on out you have to pay.
I actually did my internship for my MSW, my practicum at CAPS.
Okay.
They didn't call it CAPS then, they called it Psychiatric Division. And at that point there was Psychiatric Division, and then there was CAPS, and then there was the Center for Human Growth. And now, to my knowledge, there is CAPS and the Center for Human Growth, and those are the 2 counseling services for students. But I thought they were good services, and they seemed, I mean, I had no idea from that perspective if they were reaching enough students.
Yeah.
So I think we have a variety of options in Bloomington, probably not enough, but I'm pretty familiar, I think, with the options that we have.
We do continuing education as part of our licensing requirements to be a psychologist, to be a social worker. That's something that the state mandates. So we have a certain number of required continuing education classes that we have to do. And that's not something that I do. The outreach and education that I do is for campus, faculty, staff, students, parents. Well, across the country, and this includes Bloomington, there's a nationwide shortage of psychiatry. So fewer people are going into that specialization of becoming a physician, and that's starting to trickle down, especially in smaller towns like Bloomington. We know that college students are often already on a medication before coming to college, or will begin to experience signs of a mental illness, because that's often what happens in the late teens and the mid-20s, and they'll want to begin a medication. So if you're in a small town and this is the prime time when you might need the medication, that doesn't end up being a very good mix of things. So Bloomington, like many, many other small towns and even larger ones, is in need of more psychiatric services.
You bring in a note from the health center saying, hey, I had bronchitis, they're like, oh, you're excused, you're fine. But if you say to your professor, hey, I'm just kind of feeling down right now, they're not going to say, oh, you're excused from class. I mean, some might, but it's not as cut and dry as I have a physical ailment, let me give you excused. It's kind of harder for a professor to grasp. I think that's something we need to train them to be more sensitive about so that they can better cater to the needs of all their students.
Tim, the question, like, do you ever find students afraid to come to CAPS? And why would that be? And he said most commonly it's because they don't understand. They're afraid that their meeting at CAPS will go then on their academic record and on their transcript and then fly out to all the people who they're sending resumes to. And that is exactly what I've heard from some students.
A lack of education on our end
in terms of having people know exactly what mental health is, and when you go to a counselor, what that all entails. Does that entail they're, going to give you a pill and it's going to fix everything, which is what a lot of people think? Or does that mean if you go and utilize services, that means you're crazy? What does it mean to have a mental health problem? Students typically think the only place they can go to utilize those services are at CAPS, and CAPS, everybody knows it's really difficult to get in CAPS, especially if you're having a crisis, and what that kind of looks like. So there are a ton of resources around, not just ones on campus, but that students are able to access at fee and reduced prices, or utilize with their insurance. But a lot of people just don't know about them, or if they do know about them, it's very limited knowledge on that.
So if they got more funding, that would be what they would do with it, is hire more therapists.
Okay.
Probably have to have another facility and be able to see people on a long-term basis, because that relationship is really important. Several clients have not been able to stay with their private therapist and still get their medication from CAPS. And then they have to find another psychiatrist, and they can't find another psychiatrist, and it's just a mess. I assume that's the policy at Centerstone. I don't know for sure.
All services.
Okay,
really.
so I think Centerstone does not have enough services for people with serious mental illness.
The only concerns that I might have about mental health services at IU, and these are not evidenced, they're just sort of
Perceptions.
I'm always asking this question, is do we have so much need for help that the helpers are maybe overworked and as a result moving too quickly?
Staff is huge, because a lot of professors don't really understand mental health or mental illness as well as the CAP staff does, or maybe the administration at IU has an understanding of. So they're not trained to recognize signs of their students in distress, or they have such a big lecture hall that it's like, okay, the student's struggling, they're not trying in my class, but they don't they're not trained to look into that further. So I think that's definitely something that we as Crimson Core are talking about, possibly doing some sort of faculty training on how to train faculty to kind of like be in touch with their students and be aware of the issues that they may be going through, and to be more sensitive to those if they arrive. Because I know that there are different prevention things and outreach opportunities that just by building on those even more on campus. I know Crimson Core does a ton, but we're just one group of people, and I know Culture Cares a lot too, and Bring Change to Mind. But I think there can always be more awareness raised around mental health and mental illness. And the more you talk about it and the more you get it in students' faces, the more likely you'll reach one student who's like, okay, this is okay to talk about, and maybe I can go seek services. So I think that's the best way that funding could be utilized and reach the largest number of students.
So any funding that could be added would generally be to benefit not just the faculty and staff who get the training, but the students who would then benefit indirectly from the training. I think it's ever a good idea to say, no, we're good, we don't need any more funding, we're fine. I think the other one that stands out is substance abuse treatment. We're seeing more and more students who are co-using a couple of drugs. I'm starting to see some of the hard things like heroin and cocaine and things like that on campus. And we know that students often don't want to go away from, withdraw from classes to go through treatment. So as much of those sorts of intensive treatments that are available in Bloomington, that they could do their treatment at night, or they can do their classes at night and do their treatment during the day. As much of that is being available as possible is really useful.
Yeah, I don't know much about that. I don't know how you, like a public service campaign, PSAs or, flyering or whatever, where you could just let people know, don't freak out if somebody doesn't respond with hello, or, if the police officer sees somebody walking and they want their ID and they don't immediately pull out their ID, don't shoot them. I don't really know how to do that sort of thing.
There are tons of programs that go around and do educational type programs with students. I think the downfall with doing programs like this is that a lot of them are voluntary um, programs, and so say someone on campus partners with a residence hall with an RA, those are only going to access students who want to come to the program. There's also there's like I was saying earlier, Oasis on campus. They do programs with people who have gotten in trouble with the judicial system before. So you're only targeting a specific population or a specific community on campus, and even then, um, depending on the attitude that they go into it. That being said, the Oasis does go into Greek houses and in mandatory meetings, so they're required to attend some of those. So that's great. But again, it's only targeting those Greek students. So if you're a student who lives on campus and doesn't regularly participate in your RA's programs, maybe you haven't gotten in trouble on campus, you didn't rush in a Greek organization, or maybe you're not in a class where the professor feels as though drug and alcohol education from an external source is important, you're not getting that information unless you seek it out, and it doesn't sound like there's any reason for you to seek it out, or at least you don't feel like it. So I think there's tons of stuff that they do on campus, but it's very specific to certain types of populations and certain types of communities.
I think the awareness piece across the board solves a lot of problems because you reduce the stigma, you reduce the sort of the fearfulness of it. You also could generate a much more informed community conversation about mental health decisions. And so you no longer have people saying, it's from the devil, because they now realize, oh, those people care. The shame piece. There's a lady, her name was Rosario Butterfield, I think that was her name. But she said something in a book she wrote that stuck with me. It was that a good teacher makes it possible for somebody to change their position without shame. And I should be able to have conversations with people about mental health issues where we disagree and neither of us are shamed for it.
Making counseling more accessible to the people who need it, in terms of whether that be through insurance or offering free or reduced rates. So people maybe people who don't have the insurance can't afford to go somewhere that even they take insurance. And I also think money should be put towards reducing the stigma towards mental health, and maybe that is in terms of doing some more health education type advertising or some sort in terms of what mental health is and the different types of mental health things that you can be struggling with. Because
Well, the first one I'll tell you about is one that we do here, and it's called Crimson Core. So we have a carefully selected group of about 50 undergraduates who we train from August until May on how to provide better peer-to-peer support. Not to be a counselor, you have to go to grad school to do that, but how to look for the signs of distress, talk to a friend or acquaintance or even a stranger about those, to help provide the support, which maybe that ends up being enough, just the support that they're able to offer. Or if needed, they also know how to refer here, to bring a student over, to encourage a friend to make an appointment. So that's the first one that exists, and we know it's being helpful. Just yesterday was our last meeting, and 2 of our members shared stories just from the last month where they've helped friends go to the hospital. I mean, that's not typical every week, every month. 2 people of ours say that's happened, but that's an indication of, yes, what we're training them to do is actually helping. It's useful. So that's Crimson Core. Another program is You Bring Change to Mind.
There are some really wonderful programs that you can do. There's a program called Clubhouse where people can come and hang out during the day and do different things, and I could tell you stories, but the interview would get too long, about the cool things that the Clubhouse model can do. We don't have that here. Another thing, there's I think it's called ACT, A-C-T, Assertive Community Treatment or something, and it's a program in which you the mental health workers go out and go to the overpasses and go to the river and, you know, go to the abandoned buildings and reach out to people who have mental health challenges and invite them for services, bring the services to them.
Okay.
And they do that in Indianapolis. They have that. They don't have that in Bloomington. I'm not faulting Centerstone. They don't have the resources to do it. We don't have the political will to make that happen.
Yeah.
That's what I'm faulting.
That some of the effort needs to be in correcting the misconceptions. And not just saying we have mental health issues and not just saying we have services available, but also saying things like, this won't go on your transcript, you know, this will not end you up on academic probation, you know. So one student told me one time, like, yeah, I felt like I, you know, wanted to commit suicide, but if you go to the university about that, then they put you on academic probation, you know.
I know at the beginning of the year they have the orientation thing where a lot of students go through certain programs. I'm not sure what the exact information they give, but I know one thing they do is ask for students to send an anonymous survey in, talking about their drug and alcohol use, so we can kind of get a better picture of what that's like. And a lot of students that I've met with haven't been the most forthcoming with that information, as they see or they feel that it's attached to their IU username, and so they're less than honest about that information. So I think that's great. At the beginning of the year, you're mandating all freshmen to go through the program. I also see that it's at the beginning of the year when you're getting just like information overload on everything. Plus, you may be missing transfer students or people that were unable to attend orientation. So having another mandatory meeting like that might be nice, but logistically, maybe not be possible. So if I'm thinking not realistically, that'd be nice to have something like that, you know, beginning of every single year that you go through and having it be mandatory. But I'm not sure how you actually hold people accountable to that, because you can't not let them register for classes if they don't attend a meeting. So I know I've seen some stuff over emails that get sent out, you know, as a mass when, you know, certain policies are put in place or there's a certain culture that's kind of happening on campus. And that's, again, only targeting the people that read their email regularly.
Sure that people struggle with life across the board. So whether it is just I just had a breakup and my whole life is falling apart now, or I've spent the last 2 semesters contemplating how to kill myself, you know. Both of those people could use help. The intentionality and the sort of the severity of that help can vary, you know. But both of those people should be able to find help somewhere, and they need it. And I think that, what are we at, 45,000 students on
Something
campus,
like that,
you know, like, it would not shock me to find out that every single person has at least seasons in their life where they could use some outside input. I think that one of the number one struggles that folks on campus probably have is isolation. And isolation's not in the DSM, you're not going to find it, but there are a lot of things that flow out of that. But I know for some of them, they also need someone who is able to be purposeful and intentional about sitting and listening, and kind of has some familiarity and some experience to say, hey, I'm hearing this, this, and this, and usually that means this, you know, and that's a trained counselor.